Hello. So let us continue our discussion of the Whitsun weddings by Philip Larkin. It is the third stanza, or it is from line number 21 to 30. Now here you will find that somehow the particular form of wedding or the reference to the wedding is being taken for consideration. Larkin says, "At first I didn't notice what a noise the weddings made." Now you will find that somehow here a particular kind of a description is being made regarding the wedding couples and also the relatives who are associated with the wedding couples. He says, "At first I didn't notice what a noise the weddings made." So here wedding, it is not a noun, rather it is obviously noun, but ultimately it is indicating towards the persons who are associated with the wedding couples or wedding itself. He says, "Each station that is stopped at, sun destroys the interest of what is happening in the shade." Actually, as Larkin has pointed out, that the very day when all these things are happening, the very day when this particular kind of journey is continuing, it is a very hot day. The climate is hot, and ultimately you will find that it was full of sun. So therefore, he says that each station that we stopped at, sun destroys the interest of what is happening in the shade. Because what happens, that when you are sitting just beside a window, and ultimately you will find that something is happening outside, and there is the full sunlight, it seems to be something dazzling in the face of you, and you don't know or you don't gather any, say, impetus, you don't gather any interest for looking under the shade or within the shade, what is happening there. The similar kind of thing is being described here. "At first I didn't notice what a noise the weddings made. Each station that is stopped at, sun destroys the interest of what is happening in the shade. And down the long, cool platforms, hoops and skulls, that is the hustle bustle that is going on there, the wedding couples and also the relatives who are standing just under the shade. In the cool platforms, the long, cool platforms, the sounds are there, the chit chats were there, the hoops and skulls are there." These are an important, say, phrase that he is using here to refer to some meaningless utterances, some meaningless sounds that are there. "And down the long cool platforms, hoops and skulls, I took for porters lurking with mails." So that is a kind of a description that he's making here. He says that the hoops and skulls, I consider that, okay, it is probably coming from the porters. Probably the porters are lurking with mails, you see, and went on reading. So that is very significant. When Larkin says, "I went on reading," literally it is indicated that somehow Larkin had a particular book in his lap or in his hand, on his lap. That's why he didn't find any interest for looking for the source of the noises. And he continued his reading. It is the literal meaning. Now you can find another meaning that can be associated with this particular reference. Reading, as you see, it can also be interpreted as understanding or reading the situations. It can also mean that. So from that, two perspectives: one, reading the book; second, reading or apprehending the situation. So ultimately you will find that with that particular kind of the term reading, probably Larkin is indicating towards the two senses, you see. Ultimately it can be classified another figure of speech that is called pun, P-U-N, or paronomasia. That means unity of sense in a unity of meaning, actually. That means you see that a single word, it means double meaning. So ultimately here it says, "I took for porters lurking with the mails." and I went on reading. So reading the book or maybe reading the situation. Once we started, though we passed them, grinning and pomated girls in parodies of fashion. Now fundamentally what I have to say here, it might be a kind of a descriptive notion, a descriptive note that Larkin is using here. He says once we started though, we passed them, that is it is actually indicating the females or maybe the persons who are coming from the lower strata of society, or maybe persons who are associated with these marriages somehow, as I've mentioned, that Larkin had a particular cynical temperament, a typical form of cynicism regarding marriage, regarding these personalities who are associated with marriage, regarding the societal ambience and the societal activities associated with marriage. So anything, marriage or anybody or anything related to marriage, it became the fundamental focus of his cynicism. This is actually happening towards the first half of this poem. As we will move towards the last section of the poem, we will certainly find that the temperament of the poet, the temperament of the speaker, or maybe the temperament of the persona gradually got changed. It will happen. You will find that somehow a kind of quote-unquote frustration, I don't know whether I can use this term for this or not, but ultimately this frustrating temperament of the speaker or maybe the poet persona can also be identified towards the end of the poem. So that is fundamentally a kind of incorporation that we have to found. So here he says that I took for porters larking with the males, and I went on reading. Once we started, though we passed them, so while the train was passing them, we saw rather, grinning and pomated girls. You see that grinning and pomated, all these things are negative terms, obviously. I don't want to incorporate a feminist temperament or feminist agenda here, that the girls have been classified or maybe the girls have been criticized by him. It is not so. Rather, you will find it is not simply the girls, but you will find here the fathers and uncles, all will be at the focus of his satire. He says grinning and pomated. Pomated, you know, pomatum, it's a kind of an ancient form of or earlier form of, you see, the cosmetics. So grinning and pomated girls, you know, use of the cosmetics and also other things. In parodies of fashion, that is the cynical temperament, you see. The fashion, it is parodied. The term parodies of fashion, it is actually indicating that it is not, you know, it is not pure. Rather, it is something artificial. The fashion is not pure, rather impurities are there. The fashion is not proper, rather it is the parodies of fashion. So all these terms, all these things are actually indicating towards the Philip Larkin's temperament regarding the society, regarding the persons who are associated with such kind of things. So he says, therefore, we passed them, grinning and pomated girls, in parodies of fashion, and then the heels, veils, everything, you see. The heels and veils, fashions, pomated, grinning, all these terms are actually indicating towards marriage. So whenever you are thinking in terms of a Christian marriage, probably these terms will come to your mind. These terms that are, say, seriously being associated with the customs of marriage. And Larkin is indicating them. Heels are there, high heel shoes, you see, and veils are there, you know, it is another very important ingredient that is actually needed in a Christian marriage, and all posed irresolutely. Okay, that means it actually indicates towards the other personalities who are not directly associated with marriage here, but rather you will find that who are the relatives, you see. So they are irresolutely, they are all posed and watching us go. That means we are moving. So this us, watching us go. So the question certainly arises that from the very beginning, we have found that Larkin is indicating towards the first person and first person singular. That is why continuously he is using I. But in this particular section, that is at the end of the third section, that is section number 3 or maybe stanza number 3, that is line number 30, you will find that for the first time the poet is using the term us. Does it simply signify that ultimately it is indicating that it is not Larkin alone within the carriage of the train? Rather, there are other personalities. This is a kind of indication. Who are those personalities? Where are they going? What are the fundamental focus? And what Larkin is actually aiming at? What are the temperaments of those personalities? We will come to these questions or these answers rather in our next lecture. Thank you.